Every single morning, billions of human beings perform a synchronized unconscious ritual. We stand before a selection of fabrics, choose a combination of shapes, and systematically cover our bodies before stepping out into the world. We are so utterly bound to this behavior that our global legal systems will actively intervene if an individual chooses to exist in a state of absolute nature. We have constructed entire civilizations, laws, and moral architectures around the simple requirement that you must put something on. Yet, from a purely zoological perspective, this routine is a bizarre evolutionary anomaly. Look across the planetary landscape. Dogs do not wear coats. Wolves do not require trousers. The African elephant, an organism possessing deep cognitive intelligence, navigates its harsh, fluctuating environment without ever experiencing the psychological need for a protective jacket. Every other large mammal on Earth walks through its existence fully clothed by biology. Then there is us. We are the anomaly. We are a nearly hairless, smooth, oddly patchy primate standing in the middle of a highly biodiverse ecosystem, sporting an evolutionary aesthetic that suggests we once possessed a functional coat but somehow made a series of radical evolutionary choices. This brings us to a fundamental question that science has spent decades trying to untangle. Why did ancient humans start wearing clothes? The conventional narrative taught to children is clean, logical, and entirely incomplete. It tells a simple story of a cold primate that moved away from the warm African savanna, encountered the freezing landscapes of Europe and Asia, got cold, and wrapped itself in the skin of a dead animal to survive. But when you look closer at the empirical timeline, that tidy story completely unravels. Genetic and archaeological evidence reveals that humans began wearing clothing consistently between 100,000 and 170,000 years ago. Yet, the massive permanent migration of modern Homo sapiens out of Africa did not occur until roughly 70 sound years ago. This means that for tens of thousands of years, humans were preparing, crafting, and wearing garments while still living in the tropical, sun-drenched environments of the African continent. Clothes were not invented to combat the cold. They were invented for a deeper, more complex reason. Something else was happening on the savannah, something social, psychological, and uniquely human. To find the true origin of fashion, we have to look at the most unlikely, repulsive, and brilliant piece of evolutionary detective work in modern science. We have to talk about the louse. For centuries, anthropologists were trapped in a frustrating stalemate. Unlike stone tools, bones, or pottery, prehistoric clothing is made of organic matter. Animal hides and plant fibers rot, decompose, and vanish from the archaeological record within a matter of centuries, leaving behind an absolute void where the physical history of fashion should be. But where fabrics disappear, biology remembers. Geneticists realize that human history is mirrored in the evolutionary history of our parasites. Humans are unique in the animal kingdom because we host two entirely distinct populations of lice. We have head lice, which live exclusively in the hair on our scalps, and we have body lice. Body lice are a completely separate genetic lineage. Crucially, they do not live on human skin. They cannot survive on a bare, hairless body because they lack the physical adaptations to cling to smooth skin. Body lice live specifically in the seams, folds, and fibers of human clothing, venturing onto the skin only for a brief moment to feed before retreating back into the safety of the fabric. This biological reality creates an absolute evolutionary rule. Body lice could not exist until humans started wearing clothes on a permanent daily basis. The day humans began covering their bodies consistently was the exact day they created a brand new ecological niche, a walking textile ecosystem for a parasite to occupy. By analyzing the DNA mutations of these insects, scientists mapped the exact moment that body lice genetically split away from head lice. The data revealed that this evolutionary divergence occurred between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. One of the most universally despised creatures in human history accidentally preserved the earliest timeline of human clothing. The lice knew we were getting dressed long before we ever recorded it. If warmth was not the driving factor behind this behavior in ancient Africa, we must look at the problem through the lens of evolutionary mechanics. To understand why we needed clothes, we must first understand why we became naked. Humans are elite sweating machines. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, as our ancestors transitioned from shady forest to open, hot grasslands, they adopted a lifestyle of persistence hunting. We did not have the raw speed of a cheetah or the strength of a lion, so we relied on endurance. We ran our prey to death over immense distances in the blistering heat of the midday sun. To survive this extreme physical strategy, our bodies underwent a radical transformation. Thick fur became a lethal liability. If you run a long distance covered in dense fur under the African sun, your core body temperature will spike, your organs will begin to fail, and you will collapse from heat exhaustion long before you catch your dinner. In the unforgiving theater of evolution, dying hungry is the worst possible outcome. So over hundreds of generations, we shed our fur and developed an astonishing network of 2 to 4 million sweat glands across our skin. We became professional-grade moisture emitters, capable of dumping heat faster than almost any other mammal on Earth. But this masterclass in heat management came with a massive biological trade-off. By shedding our fur, we became physically vulnerable. Our skin was now directly exposed to the brutal ultraviolet rays of the sun, the stings of venomous insects, the sharp, tearing thorns of the scrubland, and the constant threat of minor abrasions that could easily turn into fatal infections. The first theory of clothing is entirely utilitarian. The earliest garments were likely not coats or jackets, but simple protective wraps, loincloths made of raw animal hides. It was an engineering solution to a physical vulnerability. It was a basic mechanical barrier designed to protect our newly exposed skin from the hostile flora and fauna of the environment. Sometimes the most unglamorous, boring explanation is the foundational truth. But humans are not merely biological organisms trying to avoid thorns. We are profoundly social creatures. We possess an ancient, deep-seated obsession with hierarchy, identity, and group mechanics. We are constantly, compulsively broadcasting who we are, what group we belong to, and where we stand in the social order of the tribe. Long before the invention of clothing, humans were already using their bodies as a canvas for visual communication. Archaeologists have found clear evidence that our ancestors were collecting and processing ochre, a natural clay pigment, as far back as 200,000 years ago. We were painting our skin, decorating our bodies, and creating visual symbols before we ever put on a single piece of fabric. The psychological transition from painting your bare skin to draping a specific animal hide over your shoulders is an incredibly short cognitive leap. The moment a hunter draped the skin of a dangerous predator around his waist, the object stopped being just a physical shield. It transformed into a sophisticated piece of social signaling. The garment began to speak to the rest of the tribe. It asked questions and gave answers. Did I kill this beast myself? Does wearing this skin make me look larger, more dangerous, or more attractive to potential mates? Does it signal to a rival tribe that I am an individual of high status who commands respect? This was the birth of the very first fashion industry. Long before the grand runways of Paris or New York, small bands of Homo sapiens were standing around campfires on the African savanna, mentally calculating the social status, power, and prestige associated with who got to wear the rarest, most impressive animal hides. Clothing became our visual language. For the first several thousand years, this language was crude and unrefined. Prehistoric clothing was heavy, stiff, and poorly fitting, consisting of raw skins draped over the shoulders and held in place by basic cords made of animal sinew. It was the ancient equivalent of wearing a heavy garbage bag. It offered protection, but it was highly inefficient at trapping heat or allowing fluid movement. Then, approximately 50,000 years ago, a technological revolution quietly occurred in the dark corners of the world. Archaeologists began discovering a completely new artifact in the soil: bone needles. These were not just basic pointed stones used to punch holes. These were highly sophisticated, delicate needles crafted from the hollow bones of birds, featuring tiny, precision-bored eyes at the end designed to hold thread. The oldest confirmed needle with a proper eye was discovered in Denisova Cave in Siberia. It is an object of profound beauty, shaped and polished to a level of fineness that rivals modern tools. The invention of the needle represents a cognitive leap that is difficult to overstate. It proves that an ancient human looked at a splinter of bone, envisioned a tool that did not yet exist, figured out how to bore a clean hole through a fragile, narrow tip without shattering it, and used that tool to join two distinct pieces of material with a controlled, repeatable stitch. This is not a survival instinct. This is high-level engineering. This is design thinking. The needle changed the physical relationship between humans and the environment. It allowed for the creation of tailored, fitted, multi-layered clothing. Instead of just draping a loose hide that allowed heat to escape, humans could now sculpt garments to the exact contours of the body. They could sew tightly sealed seams around the wrists, the ankles, and the neck, the precise anatomical zones where blood vessels run closest to the surface and where body heat escapes fastest. The needle arrived exactly when the world required it most. Between 120,000 and 70,000 years ago, the planet entered a series of brutal, unforgiving glacial cycles. Temperatures plunged across the globe. Large swaths of Africa dried up, food chains collapsed, and the global human population crashed to a terrifying low of somewhere between 10,000 and 30,000 individuals. We came astonishingly close to total extinction. We were a fragile, hairless primate facing a world turning to ice. For the small groups of survivors who began pushing north into the freezing depths of Europe and Central Asia, tailored clothing was no longer a social luxury or a practical convenience. It was the absolute line between life and death. The groups that possessed the needle, the thread, and the engineering knowledge to create layered, sealed garments survived the glacial winters. They kept their children warm, they hunted in the snow, and they passed their technology down through the generations. The groups without this technology simply vanished into the frost. We did not survive the Ice Age because our bodies evolved to withstand the cold. We survived because we used our imagination to build a portable artificial climate. We engineered a second skin and carried it with us across every continent on Earth. As the ice sheets eventually retreated and human society transitioned into the agricultural revolution, our relationship with clothing underwent yet another profound transformation. We shifted away from the heavy logistical constraints of animal hides and discovered the magic of plant fibers. Humans learned to take the stalks of flax, the fluffy pods of cotton, and the wool of domesticated sheep, spinning them into fine threads and weaving them into lightweight, flexible fabrics. The oldest known dyed plant fibers, found in a remote cave in the country of Georgia, date back 30,000 years. Crucially, these ancient fibers were already dyed in multiple vibrant colors. Think about the psychological weight of that discovery. Tens of thousands of years ago, a human being looked at a perfectly functional piece of woven fabric and decided to spend precious time, energy, and resources altering its color. It did not make the fabric any warmer. It did not make it more durable. They did it entirely because they wanted it to mean something else. They wanted it to speak a different visual sentence to the world. With the advent of woven textiles, clothing became an organized system of expression. Humans invented the wardrobe. We created specialized garments for different seasons, specific outfits for religious rituals, distinct uniforms for warfare, and elaborate dress codes to denote wealth, mourning, or political authority. Long before the Industrial Revolution mechanized our world, the textile industry was the primary economic and cultural engine of human civilization. It built the Silk Road, linking continents in a massive web of trade. It financed empires, sparked wars, and dictated the political geography of the globe. All of this macro-historical momentum grew out of a hairless primate with clever hands trying to solve the problem of its own nakedness. When we look into the mirror today, we like to think we are entirely detached from our primitive ancestors. We believe our modern fashion choices are based on contemporary trends, personal comfort, or urban aesthetics. But the truth is, the ancient psychology of the African savanna is still running your brain every single morning. Whatever you chose to wear today, you made a series of rapid, complex, conscious and unconscious decisions. You selected colors, shapes, and brands to project an image of who you think you are or who you want the world to believe you are. You are using your clothes to signal your wealth, your profession, your political tribe, your romantic availability, or your desire to be left alone. You are doing the exact same thing that our ancient ancestor did 150 years ago when they painted their skin with red ochre and wrapped a leopard hide around their waist. You are communicating through symbols because your survival still depends on how your tribe perceives you. We are a beautifully strange species. We are the naked ape that refused to stay naked. We get cold, we get creative, we get dressed, and then we spend the rest of our adult lives staring into a closet overflowing with garments, complaining that we have absolutely nothing to wear. Look down at the fabric covering your skin right now. What message did you choose to broadcast to the world when you got dressed this morning? And if society suddenly removed all legal consequences, would you have the courage to shed your second skin and return to the absolute nakedness of nature? Leave a comment below, share your thoughts on our evolutionary wardrobe, and let us begin the conversation.